A few minutes later, Otto stops and sort of looks around himself, and he is clearly lost. There is nobody around him, and the sirens are loud in the hallway, and he starts to panic. Otto Heaton was 19 years old when he married Cecilia. The two of them had actually been really good childhood friends, but they ended up being separated in their early teens when Otto's family moved. His father was a high-ranking military officer, and moving was something that Otto had just become accustomed to from a very early age. Once Otto had turned 18, though, he moved back to where he originally grew up, and it wasn't long before Otto and Cecilia began talking again. The two of them would get married a little over a year later, and despite not having a lot of money, the two of them were relatively happy and spent every moment they could together, and within a year, Cecilia would give birth to their only son, Julius. Now, before Julius was born, Cecilia was a little nervous about how Otto would be as a father because generally he was kind of this quiet and shy person, but those nerves quickly went out the window after Julius was born. Otto sort of turned into this all-around family man, and any extra time that he had during the day, he ended up spending with Julius, and they would always be playing and laughing together. Shortly after Julius's first birthday, Otto ended up losing his job, which put a lot of tension between him and Cecilia. They didn't have much money saved up as it was, and were basically living paycheck to paycheck. Otto desperately tried to find work for the next month, but he just didn't have any luck. Out of ideas, Otto ends up going to his father, who's the high-ranking military officer, and asked him, hey, do you have anything in the military that I might be able to do for a job? And his father said, well, I'll look into it, and as luck had it, a few days later, his father gets back to him and says that he does have a job for him. There was this new section to an old military base that was being redeveloped as part of this research and development team for new aircrafts, and Otto was going to be part of the maintenance crew. Now, he had worked on small engines before and did have some experience with this kind of thing, but overall, it was pretty obvious that it was his father who was really getting him this job. Because he was working with the military, Otto did have to attend a basic training and got equipped with some augments, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later. But 3 months after Otto initially lost his job, he and his family were being flown out to this island to be working on a military base. Once they arrived, Otto and his family only had 2 days to settle into their new home before Otto had to leave and begin work. Cecilia was a little nervous about the situation since Otto would be staying on the base during his rotation of working 10 days and then having 4 days off, which meant Cecilia would be home alone with their small child and she would become the primary caregiver. Otto had told Cecilia that everything's going to be fine, that she's a great mother, and they'll be in touch every morning and every evening since the base had a protocol where they could contact their families once in the morning and once in the evening. Then 2 days later, Otto left for his 10-day shift at the military base. Things at home during the first week were pretty tough for Cecilia, but as the days went on, she felt more and more comfortable and more confident with staying home alone with Julius. Each day in the morning and evening, she would get to talk to Otto for about 15 minutes, and they would really just talk about routine things at home, how Julius was sleeping the night before, how the day went, and sometimes Otto would even talk to Julius on the phone and tell him some silly jokes and stories. So even though these calls became pretty routine, it was something that both Cecilia and Otto looked forward to because it was the only time they got to share together, and they had been used to spending a significant amount of time with each other. So on day 9, the night before Otto is supposed to be returning home, Cecilia is there, she's waiting for his call, but Otto never calls. Cecilia waits for a call for several hours and still hears nothing. She's a little scared and nervous at first and then sort of calms herself down and thinks, well, maybe he was working late. Maybe the storm that was outside that night had something to do with the interference and the communications on the base just weren't working that well. So Cecilia ends up going to bed and sort of figuring she'll hear from him in the morning. So Cecilia wakes up the next morning to a knock on the door and she sort of figures that it's Otto. And so she leaps out of bed, she runs to the door, and when she answers it, it isn't Otto that's waiting for her. 14 hours earlier, Otto had just gotten off his maintenance shift and went back to his living quarters about 2 hours before mealtime and about 3 hours before his call with Cecilia. Otto usually spent this time just kind of relaxing, laying in bed. Since most of his day was spent on his feet and moving around, he really enjoyed the time that he had to just relax. He would look at a picture that he kept on his desk of Julius and Cecilia, and thoughts ran through his mind of being genuinely excited to get to see them tomorrow when he would be going home. So Otto, while laying in bed, looks at the picture of his family, and eventually he dozes off to sleep. 30 minutes later, Otto's eyes shoot open as he sits up in his bed, puts on his boots, and is standing in the middle of his room. Over the intercom in the military base was yelling, "Hostiles in Sector 41." Now, Otto had only been here a little over a week, and he wasn't sure if this was some sort of drill or if someone was really invading their base. He did go to training for situations like this on the first day that he arrived, and in the event of some sort of invasion, he did have a designated meeting spot with his squadron in Sector 52. Otto's body is physically shaking at this point, but he closes his eyes and he tries to remember the protocol and the area where he is supposed to go. He opens the door to the hallway and he looks out and nobody is there. Otto had actually slept through this warning over the intercom for a couple minutes before it woke him up. And if he had woken up right away, he would have seen other people moving through these hallways that he could just follow and know exactly where to go. But because he ended up sleeping through it, there's now nobody in the hallway, and he has to kind of just remember where he's supposed to be going. He's pretty confident, but he's not 100% certain where he's supposed to go, but he figures at this point it's better to just start moving, and odds are he's going to run into somebody along the way anyway. A few minutes later, Otto stops and sort of looks around himself, and he is clearly lost. There is nobody around him, and the sirens are loud in the hallway, and he starts to panic. It should be noted that this isn't just some normal military base. The section that he's located in is underground. There's entrances sort of on the sides, but for the most part, the only way in is from the top. So this isn't just like a straightforward go down these hallways, take this turn. This place is sort of like an ant nest. There's different corridors branching in different directions. There's areas that move upward and downward in these shafts, and he has lost his sense of direction completely. Even though he isn't really a fighter, he knows that his team still needs him, so he just keeps going down these hallways, looking for anything that'll lead him in the right direction. And eventually, Otto gets to a spot that has a sign pointing to the right that says Docking Bay. The docking bay happened to be the location where Otto spent most of his time working, so he knew exactly where that was. If he could get to the docking bay, he might be able to just wait there for this whole thing to be over, or there might be a whole nother squadron there that he could join up with and help them out in case they needed him. So Otto starts running down this hallway, and he gets to the door at the end, which sort of leads into a bigger room that's a hallway that leads to the docking bay. And when he opens the door, he sees on the far side of the room a silhouette of a man and woman embracing. Otto is completely frozen as the two shadowy figures turn and look straight at him. Despite being pretty scared at this point, Otto stays pretty composed, reaches over to his wrist, and pushes a button to signal a code black within the building. Once Otto does this, he sees one of the shadowy figures take off down the hallway away from him, which is the exact direction that he needs to be going to get to the docking bay. He sort of directs his gaze towards this person for a moment as they're running down the hallway, and then turns back and looks at the other person that's still there staring at him. The person starts moving towards Otto, and Otto sees that he's reaching for his hip and pulling something out of his waistband. So Otto sort of assumes at this point that these are the hostiles that were mentioned over the intercom. So as this figure is coming towards him, Otto holds out his hand, braces it with his other, and then flips a switch on his glove, which emits this sort of pulse beam at the person in front of him that was strong enough to at least knock the person off balance and for them to lose the grip on the weapon that went flying across the room. These were part of the augments that Otto had gotten during his basic training, and augments could be some sort of high-tech gear that's built into your actual body armor so that you don't have to carry around so much stuff, or it could be a situation where they actually implant something in your brain that is automatically turned on and off in certain situations in order to give you heightened reflexes or extra strength. But Otto has never used these functions before outside of light practice training. So when Otto shoots this pulse cannon, he gets blasted back against the wall, and he's sort of dazed and confused at what even really happened. But when he looks up, he sees the other person running right for him. Otto pulls a knife from his waistband and is sort of crouched waiting for this person to attack him. And as this person approaches, Otto sort of pulls back with his arm and thrusts forward, but the other person is clearly way more experienced in hand-to-hand combat than Otto is, and very easily just sidesteps the strike and knocks the knife out of his hand. The person is about to hit Otto in the back of his head when one of his augments sort of automatically turns on and his reflexes change. Otto is able to move out of the way, actually hits the person in the stomach, followed by a hit to the back of the head, and the person falls to the floor. Otto looks down at the person and they sort of have their palms up in the air. So Otto thinks, okay, I got him down for now. I just have to wait. I called a code black. People are going to be showing up at any moment. But Otto's training never really prepared him for this moment. So he's sort of pacing back and forth. He's looking down at the person saying, don't move. Don't you dare move. But there's a lot of hesitation in his voice. So as he's walking back and forth, he's sort of not really focused on the situation or what's going on. He just keeps thinking, where is everyone else? Somebody else has to show up. And as he's walking back and forth in front of this person, the person sweeps Otto's feet out from under him. And when Otto hits the ground, he hits head first. And he's sort of stunned and he blinks his eyes a few times. And right as he opens them, he sees a fist hammering down on him. And it wasn't long before his vision started to become blurry, and between each hit, he looked up at his attacker and made eye contact. And at that moment, he knew it was over. Early the next morning, Cecilia would wake up to that knock on her door, thinking that it was Otto. So she leaped out of bed, she ran to the door, but it wasn't. At the door was a general from the military base who told her that there was an incident of hostiles breaking into the base, and during that incident, Otto had lost his life. Cecilia is in shock, and she can't really comprehend what is being told to her. She thought today was the day she was going to see Otto, to see the love of her life again. But the general would go on to tell her that it was because of him spotting the hostiles and engaging with them that ended up saving the base, that they were able to apprehend the hostiles before they left the building, and Otto had essentially saved countless lives of other people that day. The general told Cecilia that Otto was going to be remembered as a hero. Since this incident at the base, a memorial has been put up there to remember Otto and his bravery that day. But as of now, there's no information on the identity of the hostiles that has been released to the public.